The red zone, one way to look at it is that we've de-risked that part of the city because there's no risk there anymore, because no one lives there anymore. If there's nothing in harm's way, there's no risk. So there are ideas of using the red zone as a mitigation area for flooding, as for water retention, to let the area and also help the area gain its original character, which was a wetland ecosystem. And the earthquakes are essentially it's Mother Nature reclaiming herself there. And I believe from a biodiversity and flood management perspective, it's a wonderful opportunity to have that corridor there and allow it to regain its original character that it had before the European colonists drained it and built on it. And it's really a great living laboratory for our young people to learn about science and engineering issues around the earthquakes, but importantly, to imagine what the future will be in these areas. So we talk to them about the potential for ecological restoration. That's the restoration of indigenous and native ecosystems, wetland ecosystems in the area, and there are examples of those plantings and restoration efforts going on now. They get to see those. We also talk about some of the other ideas that people have floated for the area too. The Eden 2 project, essentially a biodome sort of set up. I'm quite taken with that idea myself, particularly as a centre for teaching and learning, and also just a venue for public engagement and community events. But again, it comes down to the cost, and also from an engineering perspective, it would need to be engineered for future liquefaction events, and also the water and sewage services that it would require. I believe that wholesale attempting to re-engineer and remediate the area for residential development, perhaps in an effort to recoup costs at some point, will be as unfeasible in the future, if not more so than now. However, that doesn't preclude the potential for localised developments that may stimulate the local economy. It may be facilities and infrastructure around cycleways and parks and again, event centres and things like that. It may include small commercial areas, but it needs to be done wisely on a case-by-case basis. There are little patches of soils in there that are perhaps more resistant to liquefaction than others, but they were included in the wider red zone because they were small islands of potential stability in a wider, weaker area. So it just makes sense to include them in there. But they may be potential areas where sites could be developed. Now, I don't want to overemphasise the potential for development. If there's going to be the opportunity for private development, then they should bear all the costs and they can accrue the benefits, of course. But I think there are examples in Christchurch, and the suburb of Bexley is a good example, where the benefits of private development and building a community or a neighbourhood that became a community, those benefits were essentially private benefits to the developer. But when the suburb was essentially written off due to liquefaction damage, the costs were socialised, and it was you and I and our taxes that enabled those people to be bought out in the residential red zone. And Bexley is a very salutary example of how local authorities strongly recommended that it not go ahead because of the liquefaction risk that it was exposed to, and they knew about this. But this was challenged by the developer and their legal team, and eventually the courts decided that the development should go ahead against the express wishes of the local authorities at the time. I think we need to learn from that and hold people to account around these sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
But certainly the people were exposed to a hazard at the time, and we knew about those hazards. Possibly what tipped the decision-making to the development occurring is that no one really believed any earthquake would occur in our lifetimes. But things do occur. And we also knew that Canterbury was vulnerable to earthquakes. We've had earthquakes in the lived experience throughout the 20th century and in the early 2000s.
Absolutely.
We are not immune to earthquakes. They're part of the lived experience here. But when we're getting back to the potential land uses in the residential red zone, there are many things we could do that I believe would be for public benefit. Maybe potential there for private entrepreneurship to also benefit from some aspects of that. It needs to be done in a thoughtful and mindful way, bearing in mind the residential red zone itself is going to be ground zero for future liquefaction events and future earthquakes, which will happen. It's going to be ground zero for the first impacts of sea level rise that we observe, and it is also demonstrably vulnerable to flooding, as are areas that are still green zoned just adjacent to it.